The roar of 50,000 alien voices filled the grand Colosseum of Velthari. Marcus Chun stood in the center of the massive arena, his black-powered armor gleaming under the artificial suns that hung from the dome above. The metal suit hummed quietly around him, its systems running perfectly after years of careful maintenance. He had seen many strange sights during his time as a mercenary, but this place still impressed him. The arena stretched out like a small city, with seats rising up in perfect circles until they disappeared into the shadows. Floating platforms carried the most important guests, while holographic displays showed his face to those sitting too far away to see him clearly. Marcus had been hired for what they called an exhibition match, entertainment for Princess Lorelei's coming-of-age celebration. The payment was good, and the job seemed simple enough. Fight some holographic enemies, put on a show, collect his money, and leave. He had done worse things for credits, but now, standing here with thousands of alien eyes watching him, Marcus felt something was wrong. The crowd was not cheering for him. They were laughing. High above him, on a platform covered in silk and precious metals, sat the royal family of the Zephyrian Empire. Marcus could see Princess Lorelei clearly, even from this distance. She was young, maybe 19 in human years, with skin that looked like it was made from blue crystal. 4 graceful arms moved as she spoke, and her silver hair caught the light like water. She was beautiful. But her voice carried across the arena with a tone that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Look at this primitive creature," Princess Lorelei said, her voice amplified by hidden speakers. "The humans think they are warriors, but see how they hide inside their metal shells. Without their crude technology, what are they? Just soft, pink things that would run away at the first sign of real danger." The crowd laughed louder. Marcus had heard worse insults in bars across the galaxy, but there was something different about this. The princess was not angry or drunk. She was calm and certain, like she was stating a simple fact about the weather. "My father hired this one to show us how humans fight," she continued, gesturing toward Marcus with one of her 4 hands. "But I think it would be more honest to show us how humans hide. Look at all that armor. Is there even a person inside there, or just more machines?" The alien nobles around her laughed and nodded. Marcus caught sight of several species he recognized: the tall, thin Keplerians with their multiple eyes, the thick-bodied Draconians with their scaled skin, and others he had never seen before. They all seemed to agree with the princess. Marcus had fought alongside aliens before, and against them too. Most were decent enough once you got to know them. But he had also met enough of their upper classes to know that many of them saw humans as something less than civilized. They thought humans were too violent, too emotional, too willing to fight when they should negotiate. What bothered him was not that they were wrong about those things. What bothered him was that they thought those traits made humans weak. "Perhaps," Princess Lorelei said, her voice taking on a mocking tone, "our human performer would be braver without all that heavy metal weighing him down. But I suppose we will never know. Humans are too attached to their technology to ever let go of it." The crowd was eating it up. Marcus could see alien faces around the arena, all of them smiling or laughing. Some were pointing at him. Others were talking to their neighbors, probably making jokes of their own. Marcus had been in situations like this before, though usually in smaller groups. There was always someone who thought humans were just lucky primitives who had stumbled onto space travel. Someone who believed that without their ships and guns and armor, humans would be helpless. He had learned over the years that arguing with such people was pointless. Words rarely changed minds that were already made up. But sometimes, if you were patient and clever, you could show them something that would make them think differently. The princess raised one of her hands, and the crowd began to quiet down. "Let us see what our primitive warrior can do against proper opponents," she said. "Begin the exhibition." Marcus felt the arena floor vibrate slightly as the holographic projectors came online. He knew what would happen next. Digital enemies would appear, probably copies of famous alien warriors from history. He would fight them, probably win after a dramatic struggle. And then the crowd would cheer politely before moving on to the next entertainment. But as the first hologram began to form in front of him, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of drawing his weapon or taking a fighting stance, he turned away from the digital opponent and looked up at the royal platform. Princess Lorelei was leaning forward slightly, waiting to see him fight. The other nobles were settling into their seats, expecting a good show. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. Marcus reached up and touched the release mechanism on his helmet. There was a soft hiss as the seals broke. And then he pulled the armored headpiece off and dropped it to the arena floor. The sound of metal hitting stone echoed through the suddenly quiet Colosseum. The princess's 4 eyes went wide. The crowd's buzzing stopped completely. Even the holographic enemy froze in place as if the system was not sure what to do. Marcus looked directly at Princess Lorelei as he began to remove his chest armor. The heavy plates came away piece by piece, each one landing with a loud clang on the arena floor. His arm guards followed, then his leg protection, until finally he stood in simple brown combat fatigues. The arena was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own breathing. 50,000 aliens stared at him in complete silence. The princess had gone very still on her platform, her silver hair no longer catching the light as she moved. Marcus looked up at her one more time, and when he spoke, his voice carried clearly in the perfect acoustics of the arena. "Your Highness believes armor makes the warrior," he said calmly. "Perhaps she would prefer to see what a human looks like without any protection at all." Then he turned and began walking toward the arena's exit, leaving his expensive armor in a neat pile behind him. The silence in the Grand Colosseum stretched on as Marcus walked steadily toward the exit. His boots made soft sounds on the arena floor, but even those seemed too loud in the perfect quiet. Behind him, his powered armor sat in a pile worth more credits than most beings would see in their entire lives. "Princess." Lorelei found her voice first. "Wait," she called out, and her amplified words echoed off the arena walls. "Where are you going?" "The exhibition is not finished." Marcus stopped walking, but did not turn around. "The exhibition is over, Your Highness. You wanted to see what a human looks like without protection. Now you know." The crowd began to murmur. This was not what anyone had expected. The alien nobles on their floating platforms looked confused. Some were leaning forward in their seats, trying to understand what was happening. Others were talking quickly to their neighbors. "You cannot simply leave," the princess said, and now there was something different in her voice. The mocking tone was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like uncertainty. "You have a contract. You were hired to provide entertainment." Marcus finally turned around. Without his helmet, the crowd could see his face clearly for the first time. He was not young. There were lines around his brown eyes and gray threads in his black hair. Scars marked his arms and neck, pale lines against his darker skin. He looked tired, but not weak. When he smiled, it was not a happy expression. "The contract was for me to demonstrate human fighting ability," Marcus said. "I am demonstrating it. A human does not need armor to be dangerous, Your Highness. We are dangerous because of what we are, not because of what we wear." He gestured toward the arena exit. "There is a transport waiting to take me back to the spaceport, but I think I will walk instead. The scenic route." Now the crowd was getting louder. Marcus could hear voices from all around the arena as aliens tried to figure out what he meant. Princess Lorelei looked confused too, but several of the older nobles were beginning to understand. "The scenic route?" One of them called out. It was an elderly draconian with golden scales and intelligent eyes. "You mean through the proving grounds?" "That is exactly what I mean," Marcus replied. The crowd noise grew to a roar. Now everyone understood, and they could not believe what they were hearing. The proving grounds were a 200-kilometer stretch of wilderness between the arena and the spaceport. The Zephyrian Empire had turned the land into a testing area for their most elite warriors. Even with full environmental suits and emergency support, it was considered one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Crystal storms could slice through metal. The water was poisonous to most species. Predators had been brought from a dozen different worlds and turned loose to hunt freely. The temperature could drop below freezing at night, or climb hot enough to cook flesh during the day. Most importantly, there were no roads, no shelters, and no emergency stations. Anyone who entered the proving grounds was expected to survive on their own until they reached the other side. Most beings who tried it did so as part of military training. With full support teams standing by, Marcus planned to walk through it wearing nothing but his basic clothes. Princess Lorelei stood up from her throne, all four of her hands gripping the railing in front of her. "That is suicide," she said. "No one crosses the proving grounds without proper equipment." "Your Highness just finished explaining that humans are weak without their technology," Marcus said. "I am simply testing your theory." The princess opened her mouth to say something else, but no words came out. She had painted herself into a corner with her own mockery. If she tried to stop him now, she would be admitting that maybe humans were stronger than she had claimed. Marcus could see the conflict on her face. Part of her wanted to take back her insults and order him to use the transport. But she was young, and she had an audience of thousands. Backing down now would make her look foolish. "Very well," she said finally. "If you wish to prove something by dying in the wilderness, that is your choice. But do not expect any rescue when you realize your mistake. I would not dream of asking for help from people who consider me a primitive," Marcus replied. He turned and walked toward the exit again. This time, no one tried to stop him. The exit tunnel was long and dark, leading from the bright arena floor to the outer gates of the complex. Marcus could hear his footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind him, the crowd noise was getting louder as aliens talked excitedly about what they had just seen. He reached the outer gate and stopped at the control panel. A Kepler guard with 6 eyes stared at him nervously. "Sir," the guard said, "are you certain about this? The proving grounds are very dangerous. We have transports that can take you to the spaceport safely." "I am sure," Marcus said. "Just open the gate." The guard hesitated. "I will need to file a report. And, sir, there will probably be news drones following you. This is being broadcast across the Empire." Marcus nodded. He had expected that. The story of the human who walked naked into the proving grounds would spread quickly through the galaxy. That was fine with him. Maybe it would teach a few people something useful. The gate opened with a quiet hum, revealing the landscape beyond. Marcus could see rolling hills covered in strange purple grass. In the distance, a line of dark mountains stretched across the horizon. The air smelled like metal and ozone, the warning smell that came before a crystal storm. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped outside. The gate closed behind him with a solid thunk, cutting off the last sounds from the arena. He was alone now in one of the most dangerous places in the Zephyrian Empire. No armor, no weapons, no emergency beacon. Just a human being with the skills he had learned growing up on a world that had tried to kill him every day of his life. Marcus looked up at the alien sky with its 2 suns and started walking. He had 200 kilometers to cover, and he wanted to find shelter before the first crystal storm hit. Behind him, hidden in the shadows near the gate, a small reconnaissance drone lifted silently into the air. Princess Lorelei had decided she wanted to watch what happened next. Princess Lorelei sat in her private chambers, watching 3 holographic screens that showed different views from her reconnaissance drone. The small machine followed Marcus Chun at a safe distance as he walked deeper into the proving grounds. She had told herself she was only watching to see how quickly the human would die. It would be educational to observe what happened when primitive creatures tried to survive in a truly dangerous environment. The footage might even be useful for training purposes later. But as the hours passed, Lorelei found herself leaning closer to the screens. Marcus was not dying. In fact, he seemed almost comfortable in the hostile wilderness. The first crystal storm had hit just 2 hours after he left the arena. Lorelei had seen these storms kill fully equipped soldiers before. The crystal fragments moved faster than bullets, and they could cut through most armor. She had expected to watch the human get torn apart in minutes. Instead, Marcus had done something impossible. He had felt the storm coming before her drone's sensors detected it. Lorelei watched in amazement as Marcus stopped walking and tilted his head, listening to something she could not hear. Then he looked around quickly, spotted a large boulder, and dove behind it. He took off his brown jacket and wrapped it around his head and shoulders, just as the first crystals began to fall. The storm lasted for 20 minutes. When it was over, Marcus emerged from behind the rock with only a few small cuts on his arms. His jacket was shredded, but it had protected him from the worst of the crystal fragments. How did he know? Lorelei whispered to herself. She had accessed the drone's sensor logs. There had been no electronic warning, no change in air pressure or temperature that the machines could detect. But somehow, Marcus had known exactly when and where to take cover. Now she watched him examine his damaged jacket with calm efficiency. He tore off the worst parts and used strips of the cloth to bandage his cuts. Then he looked at the remaining fabric, seemed to make some kind of calculation in his head, and fashioned it into a simple hood to protect his head. Adaptive, Lorelei said out loud. He adapts. This was not something she had expected from a primitive species. Most aliens relied on their technology to warn them of danger and protect them from harm. But Marcus seemed to read the environment itself like it was sending him messages as the day wore on. Lorelei saw more examples of this strange ability. Marcus found water by watching the way insects flew. He identified edible plants by smell alone. When he needed to cross a river, he tested the current with a stick and found the safest place to wade across. But the most impressive thing was the way he moved. Marcus walked with a steady, relaxed pace that seemed too slow at first. But after several hours, Lorelei realized he had covered an enormous distance without ever seeming tired. Her own guards, even in powered suits, could not have maintained that pace. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop rapidly. Lorelei had been in the proving grounds before, always with full environmental gear, and she knew how cold it could get at night. Cold enough to kill. She expected Marcus to start looking for materials to build a fire. Instead, he found a small cave in a hillside and settled down just inside the entrance. He did not try to make any kind of shelter or heat source. He just sat quietly with his back against the wall and closed his eyes. Is he giving up? Lorelei wondered, but Marcus was not giving up. He was listening again, the same way he had listened for the crystal storm. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and smiled slightly. Then he lay down on the rocky floor and seemed to fall asleep immediately. Lorelei was confused until she heard them. Voices in the darkness outside the cave. Hunting calls from the pack of Veltharian, night stalkers that lived in this area. Night stalkers were some of the most dangerous predators in the proving grounds. They were the size of large horses, with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed to tear through armor. They hunted in groups and could track prey for days without stopping. Lorelei's drone showed 6 of them approaching the cave. Their eyes glowed green in the darkness, and their movements were perfectly silent. They had definitely detected Marcus. "He's going to die now," Lirelei said quietly. But the Night Stalkers stopped at the cave entrance. The largest one, probably the pack leader, stepped closer and sniffed the air. Its glowing eyes fixed on Marcus, who was apparently sleeping peacefully just a few meters away. Then the strangest thing happened. The Night Stalker took a step backward. Its ears flattened against its head, and it made a soft whining sound. The other pack members heard the sound and immediately moved away from the cave. Within minutes, all 6 predators had disappeared into the darkness. Marcus had not moved during the entire encounter. His breathing had remained slow and steady, as if he really was asleep. But somehow, the Night Stalkers had decided he was not prey worth hunting. Lirelei spent the rest of the night trying to understand what had happened. She reviewed the drone's recordings over and over, looking for some explanation. Maybe Marcus had some kind of chemical repellent in his clothes. Maybe the Night Stalkers were sick or injured. But deep down, she knew the truth was simpler and more frightening. The predators had looked at Marcus and recognized something that made them afraid. Morning came, and Marcus woke up naturally as the first sun rose over the mountains. He stretched like someone who had slept in a comfortable bed, not on bare stone in a cave. Then he walked to the stream that ran past the hillside and washed his face in the poisonous water. Lirelei almost cried out a warning before she caught herself. The water in this stream contained chemicals that would burn the skin of most species. But Marcus seemed to know exactly how long he could safely touch it. He cupped a small amount in his hands, rinsed his mouth, and spat it out without swallowing any. By the second day, Lirelei had stopped expecting Marcus to die. Instead, she found herself trying to understand how he had learned to survive in such an impossible way. She began to research human history and biology, looking for answers. What she found changed everything she thought. She knew about his species. Earth was not just a dangerous world. It was a nightmare world, a planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill every living thing on its surface. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, disease, predators, poison, radiation. Everything that could threaten life had threatened life on Earth, and humans had survived all of it. They had survived by becoming the most adaptable species in the galaxy. They could live anywhere, eat almost anything, and learn from any environment. They did not need technology to be dangerous because they had evolved on a world where technology did not exist. Marcus was not fighting the proving grounds. He was reading it, learning from it, and adapting to it the same way his ancestors had adapted to everything else. By the third day, Lirelei realized she was not watching a primitive creature struggling to survive. She was watching a master at work. Princess Lirelei had not slept in 2 days. She sat surrounded by holographic displays showing research data about Earth and its people. The information was scattered across dozens of scientific papers and military reports, most of it written by aliens who had tried to understand humanity and failed. But now, watching Marcus survive impossible conditions with nothing but his bare hands, the puzzle pieces were finally coming together. On her main screen, the drone showed Marcus running, not jogging or walking quickly, but running at a steady pace that he had maintained for over 6 hours. He was chasing something, a large herbivore that looked like a cross between a deer and a lizard. The creature was faster than Marcus, but every time it stopped to rest, he appeared again on the horizon behind it. Persistence hunting, Lirelei whispered, reading from one of the research papers. Humans are one of the few species capable of pursuit predation over extreme distances. She watched in fascination as the chase continued. The alien creature was clearly exhausted now, its tongue hanging out and its movements becoming clumsy. Marcus, meanwhile, still looked calm and focused. His breathing was deep but controlled, and sweat covered his skin without seeming to slow him down. After 8 hours, the creature finally collapsed. Marcus walked up to it calmly, spoke a few quiet words that the drone could not pick up, and ended its suffering quickly with a sharp stone. Then he began the practical work of preparing meat for the journey ahead. Lirelei had seen alien hunters before. They used energy weapons or automated traps, killed quickly and efficiently with technology. But what Marcus had done was different. He had used his own body as a weapon, wearing down prey that was stronger and faster than he was through pure determination. How is this possible? She asked herself. The research files gave her the answer. Human beings had evolved as endurance hunters on a world where almost everything else was bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. They had learned to win through persistence rather than strength, outlasting their enemies instead of overpowering them. But it was more than just physical ability. As Lirelei watched Marcus work, she began to understand that humans possessed something her own people had lost long ago. An instinctive understanding of the natural world. Marcus knew which plants were safe to eat without testing them. He could predict weather changes hours before they happened. He found shelter in places that seemed impossible, and he moved through dangerous territory like he had lived there his entire life. Her people, the Zephyrians, had been spacefaring for thousands of years. They had grown up with technology that protected them from their environment and provided everything they needed. They had machines to warn them of danger, tools to solve every problem, and computers to make every decision. Marcus had none of these things, but he did not need them. He carried millions of years of evolutionary knowledge in his genes and his instincts. Every human did. On the 4th day, Lirelei watched something that made her question everything she had believed about intelligence and civilization. Marcus had reached a deep canyon that blocked his path to the spaceport. The walls were too steep to climb, and the bottom was filled with poisonous gas that would kill most beings in minutes. There was no obvious way across. Lirelei expected him to find a way around the canyon, even if it meant adding days to his journey. Instead, Marcus stood at the edge for nearly an hour, just watching and thinking. Then he began to move with purpose that seemed to come from nowhere. He gathered specific types of rocks and plants, materials that meant nothing to Lirelei but clearly had significance to him. He worked quickly but carefully, building something that looked like a primitive mask and breathing apparatus. The device was crude compared to Zephyrian technology, but it worked. Marcus climbed down into the canyon wearing his improvised protection and walked calmly through the poisonous gas. The drone's sensors showed that the air around him would have been fatal to any alien, but his simple device filtered out just enough of the toxins to keep him alive. He emerged on the other side of the canyon 6 hours later, tired but unharmed. Then he threw away the breathing device and continued, walking as if nothing unusual had happened. Lirelei sat back in her chair, her forehands shaking slightly. What she had just witnessed was impossible according to everything her people knew about technology and survival. Marcus had solved a complex engineering problem using nothing but materials he found in nature and knowledge. He carried in his head. She began to understand why the military reports called humans Deathworlders. It was not an insult. It was a recognition of something terrifying and wonderful, a species that had learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy any other form of life. As the 5th day began, Lirelei found herself hoping that Marcus would make it to the spaceport safely, not because she wanted to be proven wrong about humans, but because she was starting to realize that she had been wrong about everything. Marcus was not a primitive wearing modern technology. He was something far more dangerous, a highly evolved survivor who had learned to use technology without becoming dependent on it. His people had conquered the galaxy, not in spite of their violent origins, but because of them. While other species had grown soft and safe behind their machines, humans had remained sharp and adaptable. They could use any tool, survive in any environment, and learn from any situation. They were not the barbarians that the galaxy's civilized peoples believed them to be. They were what civilized peoples became when they forgot how to be dangerous. On her screens, Marcus was approaching the final stretch of his journey. In 12 hours, he would reach the spaceport and prove whatever point he had been trying to make. But Lorelei no longer cared about the original argument. She had learned something much more important. She had learned what it meant to be truly alive in a universe that was always trying to kill you. And she had learned that sometimes the most primitive choice was also the most sophisticated one. Marcus had walked away from his armor not because he was too proud to use it, but because he was strong enough not to need it. He had shown her that real strength came from within, not from the tools you carried or the machines you built. As she watched him navigate the final miles of the proving grounds, Lorelei began to plan the words she would use to apologize. But more importantly, she began to think about what she could learn from this strange, dangerous, wonderful human being. For the first time in her life, the princess wondered what she would be capable of if she stopped hiding behind her technology and started trusting herself instead. Marcus Chen walked through the main gate of Velthari spaceport, just as the morning suns reached their highest point in the alien sky. He looked tired but unbroken, his clothes dirty and torn but his back straight and his eyes clear. The 6-day journey through the proving grounds had left its marks on him, new scars on his arms, deeper lines around his eyes, and a beard that made him look older than his years. But he was alive. And he was walking under his own power. A crowd had gathered to meet him. Word of his journey had spread across the Zephyrian Empire and beyond, transmitted by news drones that had followed his progress through the wilderness. What had started as entertainment for a princess's birthday had become something much larger, a story that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human beings. At the front of the crowd stood Princess Lorelei herself. She had arrived hours earlier, flying ahead in her royal transport while Marcus completed the final miles on foot. Now she waited with an expression that was very different from the mocking smile she had worn in the arena 6 days ago. Marcus saw her immediately, but he did not stop walking. He headed straight for the docking bay where his cargo ship was waiting. The same steady pace he had maintained across 200 kilometers of hostile wilderness. "Marcus Chun," the princess called out, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Please wait." Marcus stopped and turned to face her. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of aliens watching to see what would happen next. News drones hovered overhead, broadcasting the moment across the galaxy. "Your Highness," Marcus said simply. His voice was calm, showing no anger or pride or satisfaction. He might have been greeting her at a formal dinner, instead of after walking through hell to prove a point. "Princess." Lorelei took a step forward. She was dressed in simpler clothes than she had worn in the arena, practical traveling garments instead of royal robes. But more importantly, she was not wearing any of the protective gear that most aliens considered necessary when traveling between worlds. "I came to apologize," she said. "What I said in the arena was wrong. I mocked you and your people without understanding what I was talking about. I am sorry." The crowd murmured at this. It was unusual for royal family members to apologize publicly, especially to members of other species. Several aliens in the crowd were recording the conversation, and Marcus knew this moment would be replayed across the galaxy within hours. "Apology accepted," Marcus said. "You are young. Young people say foolish things sometimes. I am old enough to know better," Lorelei replied. "And what I said was not just foolish. It was ignorant and cruel. I watched you cross the proving grounds, and I learned things about your people that I should have known before I opened my mouth." She gestured to the wilderness behind them, where the dark mountains rose against the alien sky. "No one has ever crossed that land alone and unequipped. My own royal guards would not attempt it, even with full environmental suits and emergency support. But you did it wearing nothing but basic clothes, and you made it look easy." Marcus shrugged. "It was not easy, but it was not impossible either. Humans learn to adapt." "That is what I do not understand," Lirelei said. "How do you learn these things? How do you know which plants are safe to eat, or where to find clean water, or how to avoid the night stalkers?" "My people have computers and sensors for all of that." "Your computers tell you what they have been programmed to know," Marcus said. "But the world is always changing, always presenting new situations that no one has seen before. Humans learn to read the world itself, not just the information about it." He looked around at the crowd of aliens watching them. "Your people are not weak, Princess. They are just safe. Safety is good, but it has a price. When you always have machines to protect you and solve your problems, you stop learning how to protect yourself." Lirelei nodded slowly. "I have been thinking about that. About what my people have given up in exchange for our technology." She turned to address the crowd as much as Marcus. "I would like to offer you a position as an instructor for the Zephyrian Royal Guard. Not as entertainment, but as a teacher. Help us remember some of the skills we have forgotten." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. It would be well-paid work, and probably safer than the mercenary jobs he usually took. He could do worse than teaching young aliens how to survive without their machines, but he had contracts to fulfill and cargo to deliver. More importantly, he had made his point. The galaxy was starting to understand that humans were not primitive savages who had stumbled onto advanced technology. They were survivors who had earned their place among the stars through millions of years of evolution on the most dangerous world anyone had ever seen. "Thank you for the offer," Marcus said finally. "But I have work to do. Ships to fly, cargo to move, contracts to honor." Lirelei looked disappointed but not surprised. "I understand. But before you go, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you do this?" "You could have simply ignored my insults and completed the exhibition as planned. Why did you risk your life to prove a point?" Marcus thought about the question. There were many ways he could answer it. Talk about human pride, or the importance of respect, or the need to challenge ignorant assumptions. But in the end, he gave her the simplest and most honest response he could. Because sometimes people need to see the truth with their own eyes before they will believe it, he said. "You thought humans were weak without their technology. Now you know better." He turned to go, then stopped and looked back at her. "Princess, can I give you some advice? Please, try taking off some of that protective gear sometime. See what you are capable of when you have to rely on yourself instead of your machines. You might be surprised by what you discover." Marcus walked toward his ship, leaving Princess Lirelei standing in the spaceport with the crowd of aliens around her. As he reached the docking ramp, he heard her voice one more time. "Marcus Chun," she called out. "If you ever change your mind about that teaching position, you will always be welcome in the Zephyrian Empire." Marcus raised one hand in acknowledgement without turning around. Then he disappeared into his ship, ready to continue his journey through the galaxy. Princess Lirelei watched the ship lift off and accelerate into the alien sky until it was lost among the stars. Then she looked down at the environmental suit she was wearing, the breathing apparatus, the temperature controls, the communication devices that connected her to safety and comfort. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it would feel like to take it all off and walk outside with nothing but her own strength to protect her. The thought terrified her, but it also excited her in a way she had never experienced before. As the crowd dispersed, and they News drones flew away to report on other stories. Princess Lorelei made a decision. Tomorrow, she would begin learning what it meant to be truly alive in a dangerous universe. And maybe, someday, she would understand what it meant to be strong enough to walk away from safety and trust only in herself. The human had shown her that such strength was possible. Now she had to discover whether she possessed it too.